this is impactful for me. You know, we've talked about how the net cost for support services in the city is 9% of our budget, right? I can't think of another city that is that low. I mean, I think usually if you get to 25%, you're doing pretty great. 9%.
Yeah.
Support services.
So yeah, I'd say under 20%, and it starts feeling lean because of what that means. And really, support services, you've got to create an internal control system and monitor that and make sure that it's running an efficient process. And if you get less than 20, that means it might be too lean.
Well, we need certain checks and balances in government, right? Yeah. We need to divide functions so that you don't have any one person controlling too many of the same functions. It opens up the possibility of bad things happening, and in fact, that did happen here in Yucaipa years ago.
Yeah, that's worst case scenario, and that's something that that did happen here and in my department and
before you were here.
Thank you. Yeah, but it did occur, and it's not. While it's surprising that it occurs, it's not surprising that there's an opportunity there. If you're too lean, there's an opportunity for bad things to happen. But this was a crazy number. So we just to recap, we had a $250 million added in infrastructure over 22 years. We had a 400% increase in service levels for community services, a doubling of development services, a tripling of public safety services, all inflation adjusted. And then when we do the same calc for inflation adjusted for support services, we actually have a decrease. So we spent $5 million in 03, inflation adjusted, that's $8.6 million. And our fiscal year 25 spend for the supporting services is 6.3. So we are spending 26% less supporting our services for 300% more public safety, 400% more community services, 200% more development services, and $250 million of infrastructure that's been added. Right. This tells me that whatever that thin green strip is in between where we started in 03 to 25, jumping 25 years and decreasing it 26% means that in order for that to make sense, Yucaipa would have to be like it'd have to be like Calico, a ghost town or something. Nobody's here anymore. Right. And to say that, no, we've built all this stuff and we have all these really nice things and top-notch public safety too. But we're absolutely under-supporting, and we've always, that's the Yucaipa way, is under-support everything. And if you need more money, squeeze the support and make it all work. So.
Well, do more with less was kind of the philosophy here, right? And I think that's, I mean, to a certain extent, that's just responsible government, right? Mm-hmm. Too often we see bloated bureaucracies, right? Certainly the opposite was true here in Yucaipa. And while it's good to be cautious and conservative fiscally with taxpayer dollars, you get to a point where it becomes dangerous. You know, when I started here, I was really surprised at some of the really gaping holes in the city organization, right? We had no HR department. There was an HR professional here at one time who left, and instead of that person being replaced, an administrative assistant was handed the duties, right? That's a huge liability for a city of this size. Risk management. There was no official risk management function. There wasn't, and is still not, a procurement officer, right? A purchasing officer, because we can't afford it, right? Ryan, you got here, was it 2020?
Yep, 2020.
Describe for me what the finance department was like in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, understaffed would kind of be the, an understated way of putting it. And I think that would be kind of the general consensus of all departments here, right? I can speak directly for finance, but the amount of work that really all staff, but especially department heads and stuff was absolutely incredible. And that's why I like these slides here. I think these do a really good job because it's easy for us to sit here and say it because we were here, we lived it, we've seen it, right? But you can kind of see it playing out over time in the culmination of these slides here, right? I mean, there's a theoretical, and I don't know what the exact ratio is, but there's a theoretical, appropriate level of support per the amount of service that you're providing. And whatever that theoretical number is, you can obviously see it deteriorating over time. And it's hard to point at any one year in these slides and say, that's the year where something went wrong, right? It's just over time, and it's
How many staff members were in the finance department when you got here?
goodness. So when I got here, the director of finance position had been eliminated.
Wow.
There was no other manager or supervisor in the department other than myself when I got here. There was a single accountant who was also the entire HR department for the city. We were plugging holes with consultants. We were not able to do well or at all some very basic things, just kind of the baseline responsibility of finance, right? We weren't able to track project spending and budgets very well by funding source. Our efficiency of being able to enforce budget control was poor. There's a list of things that we could go over. But suffice it to say, we needed more heads and more technology just to fulfill our baseline role of what we needed to do here.
This is public safety.
Yeah. This is striking. Look, public safety is the biggest thing we do here in Yucaipa. We spend 63% of our budget this year on public safety services. In all cities, public safety is the number one priority, or should be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yucaipa acknowledges that. Not all cities do, right? But it is the number one thing as government that we should be doing. And so it is right that we spend more money on public safety than anything else. However, the costs for public safety have grown exponentially, not just in Yucaipa, but everywhere, particularly in California, right? And we have limited ability to control those costs because we contract with the Sheriff's Department for our police services and with CAL FIRE for our fire services. So we don't negotiate those contracts, right? Those contracts are negotiated up in Sacramento for CAL FIRE and at the county for the Sheriff's Department. We can't control salaries or benefits or how the shifts work, right? Mm-hmm. The only way we can control it is by increasing or reducing the number of personnel that are included in the contract, right? So unless we want to reduce the number of sheriff deputies on the streets of Yucaipa or reduce the number of firefighters serving Yucaipa, we do not control what these costs are. And that goes, that's really across the board in California. Everyone's been experiencing that. But just since I've been here, I think, the first year that I was here, the first budget, the cost for our police and fire contracts combined went up like $3 million.
Yeah. Well, they're big. The baseline's big, right? And so with the large baseline, it doesn't take much of a percentage, and the numbers get really large. The incremental increases year after year. What was crazy to me as I was putting these together was the 2003 spending, because you say, that's the primary purpose of municipal government is to provide public safety, but in 2003. We actually spent more on support services than we did for public safety. So we spent $5 million in support, and our public safety spend was $4.9 million in 2003. And so, so that was crazy. So yeah, if it's 60-something% this year, it was less than 50, significantly less than 50 back in 2003. But inflation adjusted, that's $8.4 million from 22 years ago. Our spend this year is $23.5 million. And so we're just under 300 or 3 times the size from a service level standpoint, from a quantifiable dollar standpoint, 3 times the service level for public safety. And that gets back to what you're saying. It goes up for everybody. I'm not saying that we have 3 times as many deputies as we did in 2003, but the cost of delivering that service is 3 times higher, inflation adjusted, than it was back then. So it's a massive. If you just say, okay, we're gonna shift things and we're gonna fix budgets and we're gonna fix things, there's no way to avoid public safety, and when we look through meaningful changes, they've got to be part of the conversation, because that's where it's all spent.
Yucaipa really has a revenue problem, much more so than a spending problem. Now, the city had been spending tens of millions of dollars on projects, but really starving the organization, right? And that comes with great risk, we do have a revenue problem, and we have a sales tax consultant, HDL, who we have quarterly meetings with, and we go over the sales tax figures. And they provide a graph for us every quarter of where Yucaipa stands in relation to our neighbors in terms of our sales tax generation. Let's put that up on the screen. I think we have that. So this is interesting. That dark line, second to the bottom, that's the city of Yucaipa in terms of sales tax revenue. The other lines are our neighbors. The only one of our neighbors lower than we are is the city of Highland. And by the way, that's about to change because they just got a Costco. Costco's going in there. So Yucaipa is lower than the city of Banning, lower than the city of Calimesa, much lower than the city of Redlands, much lower than the city of Loma Linda, and hugely lower than the city of Beaumont.
Damn.
Right? Why is that? Well, if you think about it, we don't have a lot of the big things that bring revenue that most cities rely on. We don't have the big regional shopping centers, the big box stores, the auto malls, right? We have some gas stations, we have some mom and pop restaurants, some fast food, and those things do bring revenue. And we have development on the way. Our economic development department, I'll call it a department, even though it's one individual, Ryan Miller, who does a phenomenal job, has been working hard in bringing new businesses in. We have Yucaipa Point on Yucaipa Boulevard down by the freeway that's bringing lots of shops and restaurants, and that is helping. But our expenses have been growing faster than our revenue has been growing, and so ultimately, if we want to fix this, we have to have additional revenue sources, whether that's additional or new commercial development in a significant way, whether that's tax revenue. This has to get fixed.
Yeah. You've mentioned it over and over that Yucaipa has a revenue problem, and I think that's another thing that when you first told me that, I chuckled. From a finance director side, it was maybe the first time that I had heard that, and I thought, that's interesting. And the more and more that I think about it is, and going on the roadshow and listening to people how much they like the services that are provided. Don't cut this, don't cut that, and I trying to explain, but based on the funding, we're doing too much. And I think your point is, I'm finally coming around to it, that, we have a revenue problem where we can't fund the stuff that we're doing, and we're doing good things, but we can't fund it. And if the community would like us to continue to provide those good things, we have a revenue problem, and we need the community to
we
help
built the
us fix
machine. Now we have to support it. Right.
Yeah.
And yet the knee-jerk reaction, from the public, and it's not just here, it's everywhere, is distrust and, okay, well, you're wasting money, or tighten your belt and fix the problem. So we have, it's not the city's role to advocate politically, right? There is a measure on the ballot. We are not and cannot go out and tell people we think you should vote for or against this measure, right? What I think we do have an obligation to do is explain the reality of the situation, explain the numbers, explain the facts, and let people know what the choice is.
Absolutely.
And ultimately, it will be a community decision. We've tried very hard to do that. One of the ways we tried to do that is we rolled out this video titled Yucaipa Community at a Crossroads. So, Phil, we simply cannot continue deficit spending year after year.
Right.
Next year, fiscal year 2025, 2026, we will have a balanced budget. One way or the other, our budget will be balanced. Whether that is an approved Measure S and other measures that produce revenue, whether that is Measure S fails and we make sweeping across-the-board cuts to services, one way or the other, the budget will be balanced. So take us to fiscal year 26, fiscal year 27, fiscal year 28.
Yeah.
How do we make sure we never get back in? Once our budget is balanced, how do we make sure we're never facing this situation again?
Yeah.